And when you guys are ready, I will let you take off with this, or if you want me to ask you some questions and get the conversation going, we can do that. If folks have questions, they can feel free to throw it in the chat, and we'll kind of monitor that as well and bring up a few things as we can.
Okay, I'm going to go first. My name is Badger Johnson. I'm the agroforestry manager at Rural Action in their sustainable forestry program. And I'd like to suggest a format for this beginning. I'd like to suggest a lightning round where people say their name very, very briefly, their affiliation or any other pertinent biographical information, and then, you know, one question or curiosity that you are coming to this workshop with. And that way, when Charlie and I start talking at you, it is flavored in a way that satisfies your curiosity. Does that sound good? Can I see some head nods? That sounds good. Seeing some nodding heads. Okay.
You want me to
Charlie?
call on people, or?
Yes, that'd be great.
Let's do it that way. Sometimes there's a lot of awkward silence. So you all know me. I'm mainly curious about how this project got started and what you're hoping to get out of it. So broad overview. But Anne, you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm redeveloping a farm that hasn't been farmed in a long time, and it will be a silvopasture setup. So I'm particularly interested in listening to this.
You have questions about everything, probably. Brian, you want to go next?
Brian Gwynn, Special Projects and Interim Coordinator of the offer program here on the CFEO Worcester campus. I'm just interested in the concept. You see so much discussed on it, so see some performance.
Great. Let's bounce to Casey next.
Hello, Casey Brooks. I'm a sustainable agriculture educator for OFA, and I'm interested in this basically to give some of our producers some more information about the practice.
Denise?
Hi, I'm Denise Natoli Brooks with Central State University Extension. We do a lot of agroforestry education and always interested in learning about what's happening throughout the state. Thanks.
Deb, you want to go next?
Sure. Deb Steiner, retired Ohio State, founding member of both AMP and the first director of the offer program.
Any particular questions for?
Questions, of course. I was fascinated to hear Charlie at the Steiner Summit talk about what he's planning, and I have a long, actually trained as a basic ecologist, I'm very interested in integrating perennial agroforestry into all ag systems, but organic in particular.
Thanks, Deb. Michelle, you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Michelle Wallace. I'm with Central State University Extension. I cover Northwest Ohio. I'm just interested. There's a lot of farmers that are interested in this, so that's why I'm here.
Thanks. Deanna, good to see you. You want to go next?
Sure. I'm joining you via my phone because the internet's out here, so sorry if I'm shaky. Deanna Newsom, I'm the research director at Agraria, Center for Regenerative Practices here in Yellow Springs, west of Columbus. I'm here, to learn. We're actually developing two silvopasture systems starting this spring at Agraria, one with cattle and one with goats. And so just here to learn, think about research questions related to that. Soils in particular is a topic of interest, but glad to be here.
Glad to have you. Thanks. Luciana, do you want to go next? I think maybe you came in late. We're just briefly introducing ourselves, and then any particular questions or interests you have for our speakers today.
Okay, so my name is Luciana da Costa. I am a veterinarian with the College of Veterinary Preventive Medicine. So I'm a little bit off in terms of my interest is more in animal, but related to everything that we do here in organic. So I don't have any specific questions. I'm just interested on the topic. So thank you.
Thanks, Luciana. Johnny, you want to go next?
I'm Johnny Spiker. I am also a sustainable ag educator here at OFA. And I kind of just know very little of the topic, so I'm kind of excited to learn more, and that's why I'm here, to gain some more knowledge.
Thanks, Johnny. Let's see, who haven't I called? Mark.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, I'm kind of moving about. I'm Mark Monte. I'm another Ag and Natural Resources Extension educator from Central State. I have a strong personal interest in agroforestry. I do a lot of log inoculation workshops right now. And for my own personal farm, I have a dream of doing Silvopasture fruit and nut finished pork. I'm currently looking for land to personally develop long-term, seeing things like that. But yeah, so I have a strong interest in it. I've been to a lot of farms. I always like to see what people are doing and what people have found out.
Awesome. Glad to have you with us, Mark. Let's see, Alberta, do you want to go next?
Hi, my name is Alberta. I am also from Agraria Center for Regenerative Practice. I would echo what Deanna said, because I also work on research and kind of do a lot of the stewarding and management of our on-the-ground projects. So yeah, we're developing silviculture, silvopasture, and I've been reading a lot about it, trying to be as informed as possible before we start putting trees in the ground and actually getting animals on the land. Definitely interested in some of the soil health impacts, and also I am interested in kind of the possibility of experimenting with integrating other perennial food crops. So I'm curious to see what people have to say about that and how others' experiences with that have been, and just kind of learn what there is to learn and experiment with in general.
Awesome, thank you. And Bridget is here from Herzl Farms, but I don't think she has audio. So she said she can hear us and see us, but she can't respond. So I'll just introduce her. And if she or anyone else has questions that come up, just feel free to put them in the chat again. Let's see, I think I missed Sasha. We're just introducing ourselves quickly, and any specific questions or things you'd like the speakers to talk about.
Hi, how's it going? I'm from OFA. Multitasking here, so it took me a minute. Let me see. I'm the program director. So on the education side, I just sort of manage all the grants and the folks working on those. This is the Silvopasture talk, right? Or well, I love that. It's because I have goats and work them through a Silvopasture and sort of am reclaiming really old pasture full of autumn olive and roses and all the stuff we don't want using my goats. So particularly interested in this topic.
Did I miss anyone? Doug, I don't think I had you go, but you kind of introduced yourself before. But if you have any questions, you can unmute and throw them in there.
I'll just say two things. I've worked a lot on livestock grazing systems and really interested in the potential for grass-based livestock production. But we also, from a variety perspectives, have a lot of excitement around agroforestry and the role of bringing perennial and woody crops into the conversation in farming. And we're actually haven't announced it yet. We've got a new project coming this summer that'll be in kind of looking to work with producers and do some learning circles around agroforestry. And Charlie, I'll be calling.
Okay.
Fair warning. All right, I heard a lot of good questions in there about incorporating other perennials, maybe being able to transfer this to different species, and a lot of questions on soil health. So If you have more questions, pop them in and I will turn it over to Charlie and Badger again.
You want to go first, Badger?
Well, we haven't heard a peep from you, so you should probably
Well,
go first.
There's a reason for that. I'm technologically challenged and I could see everybody, but I couldn't hear or speak into it for quite a while, but I found the right button. So obviously you can hear me now. I just want to start off by stressing that this project is still in the planning phases. We have not done anything on the land yet other than plan, and we're still fine tuning that. But we're going to make our final decisions here really soon and get things going. This program that kind of got me kickstarted on this. I've been thinking about it for a while, but our milk co-op, Organic Valley, is instituting a program that to my knowledge, first of its kind, called carbon insetting, that we're trying to make our milk co-op carbon neutral and hopefully maybe even carbon positive by I can't recall 2030, 2040. I can't recall the time frame, but they're building it from the ground up. So that kind of gave us the impetus to go ahead and start exploring this. I expressed an interest and they hooked me up with Badger and Rural Action, who I had not known before. I hadn't known Badger, I'd known of Rural Action, but that's what kind of got the ball rolling late last summer. So, but we're looking at from a farm standpoint. We increase shade for our cows. We are complete grass. Well, we're a grazing dairy. We still feed grain. We're not completely grass based, but we need more shade for the hot. It seemed like more hot, muggy weather that we're getting every summer than we did 20 years ago. And when we explored it a little bit and found out if we choose the right variety of trees, then we can also get more fodder production. That really began to pique my interest. So not only are we making the cows more comfortable, it's my understanding it will not affect the grass growth. In fact, it may enhance it a little. But then we also get more fodder growing from the trees to help offset our winter feeding bills. So it becomes a big win-win for us. And so that really got my interest piqued, and that brought us to where we are today.
Cool.
Cool. I got locked out of the office I thought I was walking into to be able to share the screen for some of this. Cassie, did that PDF of the plan make it into your inbox?
Let me look. I have not checked it. If it is, put it up there on the screen.
Cool. Well, so Karam's the director of sustainable forestry at Rural Action and has a similar background in forest farming as I do. But both of us have a broad interest in silvopasture and other agroforestry systems. So we went and interviewed Charlie as well as his successor, Brendan. Brendan trains herding dogs and worked on pretty decent sized grass-based silvopasture system in a pecan orchard down in Georgia, I want to say. And so he was also involved in this and excited about it. We got there, we talked about the goals, which Charlie just kind of outlined, some of the values, and basically struck up a contract between Organic Valley and Rural Action to do a plan. We do a lot of plans for forest farming historically. This was our first silvopasture plan for a client. It's a little funny that you have to be a certified forester to write plans that the USDA will accept for the agroforestry practices, but there's no agroforestry education for foresters in the US as part of the like accepted curriculum. So there's a big blank spot, and that's probably why a lot of you are here. Let's see, are there any foresters in this crowd? I didn't hear that conclusively. Nobody said they weren't a forester, but okay. Cassie, did you get that plan pulled up? Will you pull up the Gingrich stocking chart? It's the second page in the appendix at the end of the plan.
Okay, give me a sec.
Sure. So the field that Charlie had us look at was just a little over 24 acres. It's currently totally open. It has some trees in the southern field edge along riparian area, and oh yes, Sasha, you're familiar. That's good. Also, some trees in the northern fence line. We went there and took soil samples to get a baseline of the soil organic matter as well as the nutrient levels, which I would highly recommend before you start anything like this. So we compared those with historic soil samples that Charlie took 15 years ago or something. And yeah, not much has changed. There's a lot less potassium in the soil. So we figured as we're designing a tree planting plan, we're also going to do a little bit of pasture renovation, get some additional species in there, spread some manure and some other things that are accepted within the organic paradigm. And yeah, Cassie, have you pulled it up yet?
I am trying to find it. I apologize. I see mention of it and I just can't seem to find it. Is it an actual chart? I'm going to share my screen anyway, and you can help me navigate to it. How about that?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Tell me if I'm close.
Go to the next page. There we go.
There we go. Flew right past it.
Okay. So Sasha knows this chart. This is a chart that foresters use to gauge where they are in terms of available growing space, competition levels between trees in a stand, and it's a guide to everything they do. So a silvopasture is not fully stocked. Obviously, there needs to be a lot more light coming through the canopy of the trees and getting down to the floor of the system, so that there's not significantly less forage being produced. So if you look at the top of that chart, the A line in a forest is where, like, if you go above that, the trees are definitively competing with each other, and you're like slowing down the production of wood fiber. The B line is the lowest number of trees per acre, size of trees, basal area, like the square footage of the stumps of all the trees there. The B is sort of the floor. If you go less than that, the stand is not fully stocked. But because trees are the main product here, it's milk and cows, and by proxy forage, we're actually going to go below the B line, which is unusual but not unheard of in forestry. The C line down there is established. It basically means if you are at the C line, which could be different combinations of average diameter of the trees, number of trees, and number of trees per acre. If you're at the C line, if you left it to grow for 10 years, you'd get to the B line. To a forester, that's what the C line means. So there's different schools of thought about where on this chart you should be for different agroforestry practices. But because most of the grasses that we are looking at in the system are C3 plants, like C3 photosynthesis, we're not growing corn. So they get, you know, there's a certain amount of light that the tall fescue, and there's a lot of endophyte free tall fescue in this pasture, basically, along with some different clovers. There's a certain amount of light that these things need, but they don't actually need 100% light. So in the wild, the archetype that we're kind of normally imitating is, people say it's like a savanna. There's not a lot of savannas left in the territory that we call Ohio. There are a few, and normally the maximum sort of amount of board feet or basal area, I should say, would be around 30%. But somewhere between like around 30 up to the C line is kind of the range of stocking that people typically associate with the silvopasture. Let's scroll up, Cassie, to the like color pictures of different silvopastures and different savannas, so we can kind of get a look at what this looks like, both in terms of like an agro ecosystem and a wild. Yeah, there we go. So the top two pictures are a couple of savannas. The one on the left is in northern Ohio and is dominated by like bur oaks. The one on the left is a little bit more densely stocked. It's all so it might not be technically a savanna anymore, but the diameter of the trees is smaller. You can see in both of those top two pictures, there's basically 100% coverage of the ground flora. And so to get the maximum benefits, right, you want to not significantly decrease. You might actually increase the forage production depending on the needs of those particular forage species, while also maximizing the other benefits of the silvopasture. So in this case, it's shade for the livestock. I want to fast forward, thinking about, we're on the right slide. Oh, that's cool. Casey's saying that they used to work at Bennett Springs. It's a beautiful place, isn't it? If we fast forward into the realistic and very harsh climate change scenarios that we are facing, it's not looking good. And so there was a headline last summer where it was somewhere in Kansas where the temperature was at 108 degrees Fahrenheit and it was about 100% humidity. And the headline that went across the nation was about 2,000 cows got reported as having heat stroke in the course of a couple of hours, just died. And that combination of heat and humidity, people call it the heat index. And so one of the things that we're trying to do is decrease the heat index during the summer for the cows. It also has the benefit, if you can do it enough and get it below certain thresholds, it also has the benefit of probably prolonging the period in which the endophyte-free fescue is producing. So, you know, that's the goal. A savanna level stocking, maybe that sea level stocking, which is more like a open canopy woodland, somewhere in there. The difference there, you know, is largely about the leaf architecture and crown architecture of the tree species. If you have compound leaves on a pecan or a walnut or a honey locust or a black locust, there's going to be more light transmittance at the same stocking percentage than you would if you had oak trees there. So that's part of where that wiggle room exists. If we look at the second two pictures, like kind of in the middle, those are two different farms where the main crop is pecans, and then they either leased it to a cattle person or they started a second farm enterprise. The pecans, they like to be pretty widely spaced. So you've got a really big full crown that is producing nuts across the entire thing. And that means there's quite a bit of light for the turf grass. So this is a place where a lot of silvopastures happened. I think they've been doing it longer, like in Mississippi and Georgia and other places like that, than people have even had a word for silvopasture. Another place that you see this quite a bit is in some pine plantations. If they're widely enough spaced or have just been thinned, there's often enough light in some of the systems. The bottom,
Badger, if
yeah.
I can jump in here on those two
Please.
middle ones, those, I'm not necessarily wanting a pecan orchard. I don't know if that's viable here, but those are the type of scenarios that I envision our pastures looking like in 25 to 30 years. The only difference with these pictures is I'm envisioning those are going to be thornless honey locusts that are producing forage for the cows at the same time that they're providing shade during the heat of the summer. But that's what my vision of our project is. I just wanted to point that out.
Yes. Yeah. So the main, maybe I can skip ahead to the next topic to riff off of that. So if you're designing a silvopasture system, you have to decide what the spacing is, and you have to decide the species composition. That Gingrich stocking chart can be a bit of a guide. Let's go down to the map, the slide or the page right before the Gingrich stocking chart. Okay, so this is the field we're looking at. The bright pink is the field boundary. The polygon that goes around the periphery is a 50-foot setback. Charlie and Brendan thought they could live with a 50-foot stretch of ground that didn't have any trees in it, just so you could have turnarounds for your equipment, which is important. The rest of this field is going to be in trees. And the thought is that they're going to be in rows, and that the rows are going to be oriented north-south. That has been a conversation about row orientation because historically the paddocks have been lined out a little differently in that field. But we've got basically, I think we settled somewhere in the low 60s in terms of trees per acre. And we have sort of 3 different guilds to get to permaculture, but they're all interspersed, and they're sort of successional stages of this silvopasture. Because, this is like an expensive thing to install. It's out of reach if there wasn't support from the people at Organic Valley pulling down some grant money. And I'll say as an aside, my hope is that we are going to be able to make silvopasture a accepted USDA NRCS practice in Ohio, so that there can be cost share through EQIP and CSP. That's not currently the case here. It is the case in all adjoining states. So we're a little slow on the draw in terms of silvopasture at Ohio NRCS. But I think we're getting there. Anyway, 3 guilds. The first one we called Fast Shade. And this is to get enough shade out there quickly that the benefits to soil health, to reduced feed costs, to animal well-being and milk production are all realized earlier, sooner rather than later. And those trees make up a third of the trees we're planting. So I don't know, 21 trees an acre or something. And where we landed, we don't have a totally finalized draft, but some hybrid willow that is the kind of willow that people ordinarily grow for like cellulosic material, woody biomass, like people chip it and burn it instead of burning coal. It turns out that grows fast enough and tall enough that it produces some shade very quickly. It's also relatively easy to propagate. If you plant at the right time of the year, you can just put a stick in the ground, basically. The second guild, as we might call it, is still quite fast growing, but has some other benefits. And for that, we chose black locust. Black locust is the native tree that is able to fix the most atmospheric nitrogen in the ground. It fixes much more than honey locust, which is the sort of terminal standard tree that it's gonna be in the field later. And we wanted to put those in there because eventually, right, you have to once the trees get big enough, your stocking is going to get too high, and so you have to plan for cutting some trees out and then cutting more trees out after that. So successive thinnings. There's a question there, basically fast shade or quick shade, because trying to positively impact the bottom line, the triple bottom line, ASAP. Responding to Alberta's question there. So
That was a willow. That was a willow tree, right?
Willow, yeah,
Okay.
like a Mia Bina willow. You want to look that up.
Oh, okay,
Another
thank you.
option, yeah, another option would be to do a hybrid poplar.
Okay,
Which
yeah.
is in the same family, behaves very similarly. Reason I'm pushing for willow is that there's already a willow agroforestry person in Ohio, Howard Peller, that we can source this from and keep the community strong.
What was the variety of willow?
Mia Bina.
Okay.
Basically any fast growing willow or poplar that are, these things are bred to grow faster than like natural willows. They're not GMO or anything, but just yeah. So since we know we're going to thin out a second wave as the trees get bigger, we chose black locust because it produces fence posts, which can be used very profitably, sort of import substitution in the farm business at Buckskin Valley Farm for fence posts. And when you cut them down, there's a big flush of nitrogen into the ground, into the soil, and you can see the grass underneath really benefits as the roots die off. And somebody was asking, I think, about animal nutrition. Foresters in Ohio when I talk about planting black locust, they react with revulsion, I think, because black locust can really dominate on mine scarred landscapes where other trees just can't survive. But they root sprout like crazy. But because of the disturbance regime in this artificial ecosystem where Charlie comes by and clips ironweed and other stuff after the cows are out, just so the forage species stay dominant and we don't get less desirable grasses and forbs in there. You can just clip back any root sprouts pretty easily. from the black locust, which is not something that a forester is typically able to do or interested in doing, but it's just happening anyway. So the other thing is there is a concern that the endophyte infected tall fescue is creeping in from the southern edge of the field. It's much stronger because of the endophyte, and so it eventually always creeps back in if there's any around. There's been studies, you can ask John Fike about this at Virginia Tech, where the condensed tannins that are in the leaves, the young leaves of black locust, bind with the alkaloids in the digestive canal of the cow and reduce endophyte toxicity. So it's a good thing. Like the leaves, after they cut the trees down for fence posts, would be very good thing for the cows to eat. So
I had a quick question on this sort of note. Are you planning, like, so when you're doing this thinning and then you're going to have the stumps, are you planning on deliberately cultivating those stumps for fodder production as like a coppicing system?
yep, that is exactly what I've just been describing.
Cool.
Yeah, my thinking is when we cut these, we will cut them down at ground level. And as we mow a couple of times a year, at least once a year, we will bush hog those off so you get fresh sprouts coming up. And I've had no experience with this, but I'm told that the livestock really relish that stuff. And the same way with the hybrid willows. Once they come down, we're thinking that they can actually become a perennial fodder as long as we manage them and keep them short and be able to do that. There was also a question came up that we do intensively graze our cows now, and we intend to keep doing that through this Silvopasture system.
Yeah. The third and final kind of wave of trees is what people in the coppice and pollard world would call like your standards, where you're not cutting them down, you're leaving them to grow to their full natural mature height. And in this case, that's these thornless honey locusts. They're thornless because basically honey locusts just have thorns close to the ground. And if you take scion wood from the top of a mature tree and graft it, the scion won't produce thorns. And the rootstock is typically a clone of a thornless honey locust variety. So that's kind of how that works. I'm going to make sure I go slowly here because there's a lot of detail about honey locusts.
So it's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Badger, but these honey locusts, there's going to be grafting involved with getting the correct honey locust in place for the long term.
Right. Yes. So these sort of really high performance trees that are like doing a lot for you sometimes take a little bit of attention to detail to source the right genetics, to manage them correctly. These honey locusts were developed by agroforesters 80 years ago, and people have played with them since then some. But basically, they're not only thornless, and they also, the roots of them do a little bit of nitrogen fixation, not a whole lot extra to share with the forage, unlike the black locust. But the real prize is that, and I guess I should also say, they've got the right leaf architecture with the compound leaves, but the pods, they're bred for fat, juicy, big pods that are like 39 or 40% sugar by dry weight, have a fair amount of protein, have some fat. I don't know that cows can produce. I don't think cows digest the seeds per se. Those sheep supposedly do. So if there wasn't that clipping once a year at least, there would be some concern about honey locusts, growing up in the pasture or whatever. But the pods can produce, like people say, the equivalent of 2,000 pounds or more of feed oats per acre per year. And it comes on right at the tail end of when the fescue is producing anything. And so the thought is you might leave them out there for a little while longer, instead of bringing them into the barn and just feeding them there, because they have these pods to eat. And that saves on your feeding cost, basically. And so that's the star of the show. The grafting and the sourcing of the genetics is, I think, part of why it didn't catch on as soon as those genetics were available. So it's just a little more complicated to think about. I've suggested, and we'll see, but there's a few other possibilities for those standard trees. We suggested putting in a few seedlings of improved American persimmons, and they are useful basically for the same reason. They produce a lot of food at the end of the grazing season that drops to the ground and gets eaten by the cows. And that one has its own set of challenges. Half of them might be male, hard to know until they start flowering. So you might have to thin those, but they don't have the danger of having thorns, and nobody's going to object if they start coming up in the fence rows. The last species that I suggested we play with is just a few seedling hardy pecans, and that's just a homage to Brendan's past as a grazer in the pecan orchards. Also, when you look at the climate change atlas that the Forest Service has for bird species and tree species, the potential range of the pecan is moving way north, and where this is in Ross County is just inside the newly expanded potential commercial pecan production area. And so we're just throwing it out there in the name of assisted migration. And they have compound leaves too, so they're a good species.
Brendan says that he anticipates being the start of the new heart of the pecan growing belt when it gets too hot in Georgia. So we'll see how that goes.
Well, you have to start somewhere, and the fact that you have
exactly
a bunch of giant pecans already established within, a stone's throw away of the pasture, kind of anomalously, is very encouraging to me. I want to slow down and see where people's curiosity might lead us in this last, 25%. Douglas asked, how do you protect the tree seedlings during establishment? Charlie, I'm sick of listening to my voice. Will you talk a little bit?
Okay. What we're planning to do at this point, we're going to use the tree tubes. There's probably a special name for those, but I don't know what that is. But the tree tubes, and I think they're about 4 foot tall, Badger, something like that.
5 foot.
5 foot. Okay, we'll put those out within each individual tree. And what we're planning is we're going to plant rows of trees. We're going to have 3 rows grouped together. I'm thinking, if I remember right, the plan called for them to be 12 feet apart, the rows. And then we will run, while the trees are young, we're going to run a hot wire up and down each side of the trees to keep the cows from going in and knocking the tubes down and grazing on the trees while they're young and vulnerable. Now, I don't know exactly when in the plan, whether it's 5 years, 10 years down the road, that we won't have to have those hot wires up there. But at the initial stages, that's what we're planning to do, because we can just envision the cows go out there and oh boy, we've got something to rub on here. This is going to be a lot of fun, and they can destroy the whole planting in a very short period of time. So our plan right now is to use the tree tubes and electric fence to protect those rows of trees until they get well established.
Making a note to myself here.
I also think another thing that was talked about that I think in a lot of tree plantings, they try to control the vegetation right around the trees for the first year or so it doesn't compete with the new seedling. In the conventional world, I think Roundup is used. Well, that's not an option for us. So I think they call them, well, I don't know, here again, technical name, but I call them a tree mat that we'll put down around each one that will be on the ground, shade out or kill, basically keep any of the grass from growing up within 2 to 3 feet of the new seedling. And then eventually they will biodegrade down as the years go by, is what I understand that we're going to use. It's going to cost some money, but in the long run, I think it'll be a big help.
So
If we don't, if we don't, they don't biodegrade, we'll just remove them and put them in your next Silvopasture.
Okay.
And then
That sounds like a lot of work, Badger.
Brendan's children. Then the other thing is when you take the tubes off, people always ask that. It's not just cows that occupy this space. Agroforestry systems are, definitely enhancements for wildlife as much as anything else. And so you'll have deer in there, and the deer will, the male deer at a certain time of year will rub their felt off their antlers on anything that looks like a tree. They tend to like things with a stem caliper of like 2 to 4 inches. And so just about the time that the trees are looking like they want to hulk out of the tubes, when they start to have like a 4-inch caliper width, you take like a box cutter and you slice the tree tube down long ways and pull the stake off of it if you want. And then again, you can move them to another Silvopasture and hopefully get a second use out of them. But yeah, it's not just the cows you have to worry about, and it's these the antlers.
There was a question in the chat about irrigation, any irrigation plan for the trees, and you're getting them established.
It's a good question. Sort of. There's a few. So
we do not currently have an irrigation source to be able to do that. So I don't know that that's going to be a part of the program at all.
There's not drip irrigation on the system, and there's not going around and dumping water on these trees. But that's not to say that we haven't accounted for the water needs or reducing transplant shock. There's a few things that we're doing here to account for this. One, Charlie wants to do a fall planting, and so the fine tree roots are probably not going to grow much until the spring, but they will be in place, ready to start growing as soon as they wake up. And it doesn't really dry out until July, usually.
In a normal year, that's right.
Yeah. Second thing, the weed mat at the base of each tree is called a water saver weed mat, and it's 40-inch by 40-inch square. And by reducing competition in the root zone with the fescue, there's a space where the water will soak through the mat, but it's going to wick sideways, and the grass will get some of it, but the tree will get most of it. So there's that. And then we finally, the plan calls for site prep with a subsoiler. You know, some people are familiar with the whole like key line design thing. We're not doing that. But we are doing the version of that foresters like to do, which is getting a big steel shank 2 feet in the ground. As is often the case, there's like a hard layer starting about 18 inches down. And so by breaking that up by half a foot and loosening up the soil with a couple of passes, basically Charlie has to go out to the line that I drew north-south, which is sort of like the longest tree line with the subsoiler, and rip that along the line, and then you rip it again. Makes it very easy to plant, and the sort of loosened soil, that yellow line is sort of the first line. Can you guess why I put it there? Like, besides the fact that my ArcMap license doesn't include the expensive one where I can put dots at even spaces. It wouldn't be that useful for Charlie to have dots everywhere. Basically, start at that red dot, go south, and then you have the other tree rows 50 feet off from there, on either side across the field. That rip will help water soak into the ground, and it'll help the tree roots grow really fast through the loosened soil, and that will, along with the water saver weed mat, give them a huge advantage in terms of their ability to absorb water. Yeah.
Okay, just on that note with subsoilers, I know it's more of a thing with alley cropping, but are you planning to use a subsoiler for like root pruning throughout the life of the system to reduce root competition? It's probably not necessary for a silvopasture like it would be in alley cropping, but I was just curious if that's something you thought about.
No, and I'll tell you why. So when you look at that stocking chart, if you zoom in on the bottom left kind of corner where the silvopasture systems live, we're going to start out with 63-ish trees an acre, and then we're going to cut the willow out of it and turn that into fodder, and then we're going to cut the black locust out of it and turn that into fodder. And that means that we have a pretty low density at the sort of terminal spacing. You got 20 or 21 trees an acre, which is very low. We're not going to get there until the trees are big enough to cast adequate shade, so that's really when do you pull the trigger for a thinning? When the residual trees will be enough to meet your need for shade. So with 20 or 21 big trees an acre, it would be a little silly to root prune.
Makes sense.
Yeah, because you want those trees to be really strong and do their thing.
How many years till this is all kind of in place?
Well, Charlie, sorry.
We are beginning, actually, according to the plan, there's some site prep needs done. We're actually going to start probably in the next 2 weeks by overseeding some more lagoons and stuff into the field to beef up the forage that's already there. And then we're hoping to do the site prep, the subsoiling and things like that in late summer, early fall is what I imagine, aiming for an early fall planting of the trees. The actual trees is kind of what's on my radar right now. That if the conditions are right, and we have time to do it, we may speed that up. I don't know how far into the summer we can do that. Badger is going to have to advise me on that, but I'm kind of looking at probably September, something like that, this fall.
And then it's going to be what, maybe 20 years before this is like when you have your standard trees growing?
Yeah, eventually, before everything else is pruned out and we have those big, beautiful, mature trees that the cows can graze under. I'm thinking 25, 30 years. Am I off on that, Badger?
Well, I'll say we're reducing competition around the base of the tree. We're subsoiling. We are fertilizing. Cassie could comment on my fertilization recommendation. So Cassie, if you want to open up the, or if you want to go down to what the agronomist said, it's still in the PDF plan. It'll be under the stocking chart, a few pages. We can look at that. But the point of me asking her to bring that up is we're going to bring all of the macronutrients up to sufficiency level before we plant any trees. So we think the trees will grow pretty fast because of the site preparation, because of the control of the weeds, and because of the fertilizer. So
and one thing I will add about this is we anticipate keeping that in the grazing rotation all through this year and next year. Maybe right while we're doing the actual tree planting, we may skip a grazing, which typically that time of year we'll graze every 30 to 35 to 40 days, depending on the weather. And but we anticipated being in production, milk production, right through the whole process, and through the whole project, the 20 years, whatever it is.
Well, I have many more questions, and I'm sure everyone else does too, but we are at the end of our hour, unfortunately. If you guys are willing to stick around and there's a couple more burning questions, I'm happy to keep the link open for a few more minutes, but I'm just going to thank you right now for coming and chatting a little bit about this exciting project. This has just been great. I really appreciate that. So got a couple more questions in the chat, and if you guys need to bounce, go ahead, let me know.
I do have one thing I just want to add. I do have to get on another meeting, but so just some cool things that CSU is doing with regards to agroforestry. We're in the process of arranging to get an academic license to a software called Overyield, which is all about economic projections and design of agroforestry systems. So CSU educators are going to be able to help you out and like work with you to build designs for these sorts of things in like a mapping system that will do the individual little dots and things like that. And also the company that created Overyield, which is called Propagate, they just got awarded a big grant with TNC and some others. And it's going to be a fund that people can apply for money for cost share as like, just because the government is taking a little while to get it all loaded up. So, we at CSU are happy to help you out with that sort of thing once we get all that lined up and they get their ducks in a row on their end.
I want to clarify something. First of all, I don't love Propagate and I don't love Overyield, but I am curious if in terms of cost share, you mean that they will be passing through money to help people establish, or will they be paying for the software license for you to use their software?
No, so like they will be giving money for people to buy stuff. And then we are allowed to use the software to help people do designs at no charge.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, at least that's the conversation that we had with them. So like we'll have an academic license to the software, so we can do all the software and design and send people the designs and things like that and work with them. And then we don't have to charge anybody for that.
Sounds promising.
Yep. So, but I got to go. Thanks. That was really interesting to hear about your project.
Nice to meet you.
Anyone else? There's a question in the chat about certified organic fertilizer and what you plan to use.
Well, we haven't arrived at the final conclusion yet, but looking at the soil tests, it looks like we're low in potassium and sulfur and phosphorus. And the discussion so far has been about using, I think with our certifier, we're allowed to use potassium sulfate. So that's one option. I know we use a lot of chicken manure on the rest of the operation. So that will no doubt be a part of it. It's just whether we can chicken manure tends to be a little low in potassium. So whether we can get enough out of the chicken manure, that just kind of remains to be seen. And if we use chicken manure, we may have to add in a little sulfur to that in a form that is approved by our certifier, which I'll have to do a little bit of detective work to see exactly what it is that we are allowed to use with that. But basically, it looks like potassium sulfate and chicken manure in whatever combination the recipe calls for.
I'm sorry we didn't get to look at your budget. I was kind of interested in that, but the time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah. I will say the first time I saw the budget, it kind of took my breath away. I knew it was going to be some investment, but this is not a cheap thing to do. And it would be nice if we could get cost share from whatever source we could, because for a widespread adoption with a lot of farmers, cost is going to be a big problem, particularly in the next year or so. That I know dairy farmers, just like everybody else, with the inflation the past 2 years, everybody's thinking short term, not long term. So that is a hurdle we need to get over. But you know, if we can get something out there so people can actually see it and see that it has potential to work, that's that, you know, it's the first step. Somebody has to make that first step. And it sounded to me like from the people that were on here, there's a lot of people interested in doing the same thing. So that's really good to see.
What kind of data do you think would be like useful in trying to promote this as a conservation project? You know, that's something that could get government funding. I'm just trying to think ahead here. Maybe anybody can answer this.
Well, the thing with NRCS is you have to say what resource concern are you addressing, or series of resource concerns are you addressing? Because people who are foresters control the implementation of these practices, they have to be legible to people with no agroforestry training, who think like foresters, which that is to say people who are managing natural forests for sustained yield of timber. So learning to translate what we're doing into forester speak is good. Documenting how you are successfully addressing the conservation concerns, resource concerns. So, you know, is there less cow manure running into the creek at the southern end of the field? You know, if we could document that, that would perk up some people's ears.
From a farmer's standpoint, if we can document how much more comfortable the cows are and can correlate that to milk production in our case, or beef production, or sheep, or whatever, and then the fodder production to increase the productivity of our land, that would get farmers' interest. Now, whether that translates over into funders' interest, I don't know, but I would think that if that could be well documented, it would really help out.
Ideas, Luciana?
No, yeah, my head is just like, I was just like thinking exactly like you were thinking, Charlie, in terms of like, if we have animal health and animal well-being, that sometimes it's difficult for us to be measuring this, but there is a way of doing it. It will be wonderful of, you know, like just right now and during the process as well. And just another thing that I was thinking during the presentation, is there a way for us to have, for example, another way or source of money. For example, if we have bees, I'm not sure if you can extrapolate in terms of just having, you know, like a more broad, different types of culture or animals or source of funds. I don't know, like it was just like a curiosity.
I'll tell you, I think I heard you mention bees. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I have a neighbor that's on our same road that he is really into bee production, honey production. And I think I think last time he told me he has 50 or 60 hives. And he just moved onto our road about 3 or 4 years ago. And as I got to know him, he asked me, he says, do you guys have a field of clover or something back here? That he says, my bees all seem to be going that direction and they're producing really well. And then I explained to him our grazing system. I said, we have clover in bloom virtually all summer long, because I explained to him how we manage the grass to, we've always got some that's in the bloom stage, and then we eat it off, and then 30 days later it comes back. And he was amazed at that. And he says, well, I don't know much about that. That's the first he'd ever heard of it, but he was really excited. He said, keep doing what you're doing. So, you know, if we get extra trees in there, I'm assuming these honey locusts are going to bloom at some point in their life cycle. So that'll just be extra for him. So when he found that out, he keeps us supplied in all the honey we want.
Very exciting. Thank you.
Mhm.
Deb, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Just thinking about some funding support. I mean, this is such an exciting project. Thank you so much, both of you guys, Badger and Charlie, for sharing all this detailed information. I definitely would think, Sayer, it would be so helpful to have as much data. You know, this is a one of a kind. And there's going to be increasing excitement here. We already have a multidisciplinary team, with a vet, and I'm sure you could get soil health people involved. And so it would be a case study, obviously not replicated trials that we wouldn't want to think about. But SARE, and I could see SARE from a producer standpoint for a small amount of money, or a full SARE grant, at least to help. That I would think would be a fairly easy sell. I would love, Cassie, to see this as a probably totally unique OREI grant that could bring in considerable resources, particularly from the scientific side, but could probably also help Charlie. That may be overly optimistic, but I would love, even if it doesn't get funded, just to hit the program with these ideas and start planting seeds in the scientific community mind about future funding, and having an interdisciplinary team would be a really important part of that. So the OFRF could be a potential source as on-farm research, but we're talking small amount of money, but still, I really think you've got a really rich opportunities here to expand beyond. And I know that's your long-term goal, Charlie, would be to synergize and get as much information, as well as Organic Valley. Let's really build on this and synergize as much as we can to take what seed we got and make it grow much more, because this is just really exciting.
Well, Deb, we may be calling on you for some advice as we go through this thing, because I know you know that landscape a lot better than I do.
Yeah, well, that's why I'm talking to Cassie and the university folks, and I can say from experience that Charlie is an absolutely fantastic research partner. my late husband and I worked with him many, many years ago. We probably took soil samples on that field at
No
some
doubt.
point.
No doubt.
Yeah, and it's just one of the joys of my career, working with Charlie and his family.
Thank you, Debbie. I appreciate that.
Yeah, be in touch if you need any contact information. I saw you already sent me something, Badger, and I'm assuming that Organic Valley's taking quite a bit of data on this project already, as part of their carbon inset program. But yeah, if there's some other stuff you want to try to capture and you want to reach out to some of the research folks at Central State or Ohio State, let us know what you need and we'll see what we can do together. That's what this is all about.
I really appreciate that, Cassie.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys both spending your time here today. And this was just really, really interesting. Totally cool. So, and we will post this online. So hopefully we can get some other people interested in it. But I think we're going to call it, and we'll hopefully see a lot of you in next month or this month. It's already February, isn't it? Hopefully we'll see some of you on the 16th at our workshop and at future sessions. So thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Nice to meet
Thanks.
everyone. See you
Yeah,
next time.
thanks for coming.